Hello everyone and welcome. So in the last video I talked about for loops in C++. We saw that you can use a for loop to do something repeatedly in your program without actually having to rewrite all of the code again. So let's say if you wanted to see out hello 5 times, you're not going to write see out hello and then paste that line 5 times. Instead of that, you're going to use a for loop. So for int I equals 0, I is smaller than 5, I plus plus, I want to see out hello, like so. And if I run this, this is automatically going to output hello 5 times. Okay, now we also saw that a for loop is an easy way to iterate through arrays. Instead of accessing each index, you could say something like a has 5 elements. The elements are going to be these. And for int I equals 0, I is smaller than 5, which is the length of the array, I plus plus, see out a index I. And this is going to output all of the elements of the array, okay? Now in this video, I'm going to cover some more advanced topics. So I'm going to talk about for each loops, then I'm going to talk about nested loops, and I'm going to talk about the break and continue keyword. So let's get into it. So first of all, when you want to iterate through containers specifically, instead of iterating a set number of times, you can loop for each element of the array using a for each loop, okay? So instead of all of this, you could write int u colon a, and then instead of see out a index I, you're going to see out u. So this is a for each loop. Now, basically what this does is for each integer u in the array a, I want to see out that integer. So if I run this, as you can see, this is going to output the exact same thing as the loop that I used before, but it is much shorter, it's much cleaner, and it's much easier to use. So this is a for each loop. Instead of iterating a set number of times, so instead of defining an iterator and then incrementing or decrementing that iterator a set number of times, you're going to iterate for each element of the array. So for each integer u in the array A, I want to see out that integer. Now I could have called this whatever I wanted. I could have called it any letter, any number. I could have called, well, actually numbers no, but any letter, any word I wanted, I just called the u for simplicity, okay? Now instead of writing int, you can also write auto. So this is going to do exactly the same thing. There's actually a little bit of a difference between the two, but you don't really have to understand that yet. So this is very useful when you want to iterate through containers, so stuff that hold multiple values like arrays or vectors, which you haven't learned yet, but you will in a future video. So this is how a for each loop works. So now I'm going to talk about the break and continue keywords. So let me delete all this, and I'm going to write a for loop. So for int I equals 0, I is smaller than 5, for example, I plus plus. And then in here, I'm going to put an if statement. I'm going to say if I equals 3, for example, I want to continue. Otherwise, I want to see out I, like so. So let me run this. And this is going to output the numbers 0, 1, 2, and then 4, okay? So what is this doing? Basically, I've defined a for loop, which is going to iterate through the numbers 0 to 4, right? Because when I is equal to 5, it's going to stop iterating. And then inside of the for loop, I wrote an if statement. I said if I is equal to 3, so in the iteration where the iterator is equal to 3, I want to continue. So I want to move past that iteration, and I want to automatically go to the next iteration. And then otherwise, I want to see out I, okay? So basically what happened is when I was equal to 0, this was not met. When I was equal to 1 and 2, this was also not met. And so the program just went to this statement right here, and it see out at I. And then when I was equal to 3, it continued past that iteration without doing anything and automatically moved on to the next iteration. Now I could also say something like if I is equal, if I is equal to 3, I want to see out hello, for example, and then I want to continue, and then I'm going to write cout I, and let me run this. This is going to output the numbers 0 to 2, and then hello, and then 4. So basically what's happening here is if I is not equal to 3, then it's going to go to this line right here. It's going to see out I. So in 0, 1, 2, and 4, it's going to just see out I. And then when I is equal to 3, first it's going to see out hello, and then it's going to continue. So it's going to automatically move past this iteration to the next iteration. And so it doesn't really get to this statement right here. That's why the number 3 isn't being outputted. It's when the program sees this continue keyword, it automatically moves to the next iteration, and it doesn't get to this cout statement right here. Okay, so I hope that was easy to understand. Let's talk about the break keyword now. So now instead of doing all of this in here, I'm just going to break. So let me run this. As you can see, this is going to output the numbers 0, 1, and 2. So what is happening here? The loop is the same. It's going to iterate from the numbers 0 to 4. And if I is not equal to 3, it's just going to see out I. If I is equal to 3, it's going to break. And when the loop breaks, it means that it stops completely. So the continue keyword just goes to the next iteration. So it stops the iteration that you're on and moves past that iteration and goes to the next. The break keyword stops the loop completely. So if I is equal to 3, then I is not even going to be incremented to 4, and the next iteration is not even going to happen because this break keyword is right here, and it's going to stop the loop completely. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you is that you can actually put loops inside of loops. So this is going to be my outer loop. It's going to iterate from 0 to 5, right? Or from 0 to 4, because when I is equal to 5, it's going to stop. Now, inside of here, let me just see out end line I end line so that we keep track on which iteration of the outer loop we're on. And I'm going to create another loop, which is going to be the nested loop or the inner loop. I'm obviously going to call the iterator something different. Let's iterate until j is equal to 2, j plus plus. And in here, I'm going to say if j is equal to 2, for example, I want to see out continue so that we know when we continue like this. And then I want to continue. And else if, for example, I is equal to 2 and j is equal to 1, for example, I want to see out break like so, and I want to break. So if none of these conditions are true, I want to just see out j and then an empty string, so a white space. Okay, so I think everything's fine. Let me run this to show you the output. Now, this is probably not what you would expect. So why not? Well, first of all, it's going to see out I, right? In the beginning, I is equal to 0. So it's going to see out 0. And then in each iteration of I, it's going to iterate 3 times when j is equal to 0, 1, and 2. Okay? Now, if j is equal to 1 or 0, then it's just going to output j. If j is equal to 2, which is what I've done here, I want to continue, but first I'm going to see out continue. So we know that we've continued here. Now I is equal to 1, the same thing is going to happen. Now when I is equal to 2, it's going to see out 0, and then when j is equal to 1, then this condition is going to be met, and it's going to see out break, and it's going to break. Now, it's out at break, but as you can see, there's still more output after the loop broke, right? So why does this happen? Isn't the break keyword supposed to stop the loop completely? Well, yes, but the break keyword is only going to stop the closest loop possible, meaning that it's only going to stop the nested loop. It's only going to stop the loop of which it is inside of. Now, in this case, break is inside of the inner loop, and so it's only going to stop the inner loop, but the outer loop continues running. And so I is still going to be incremented to 3, and this is still going to happen, and then 4, and then this is going to happen, and then when I is equal to 5, it's going to stop, right? And the same thing for continue. The continue keyword is only going to continue to the next iteration of the loop that it's inside of, right? In this case, it's inside of the inner loop. And so only when the inner loop continues, the continue is only going to continue to the next iteration of the inner loop. It's not going to do so for the outer loop as well. Okay, so I hope that was easy to understand. And I think that's all I had to show you today. In this video, you learned about an easy way to iterate through containers using for each loops. You also learned about the break and continue keywords, and you learned about nested for loops. So putting loops inside of loops and how the continue and break keywords work in those situations. So again, I hope this was easy to understand. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask as always. If you have any suggestions for future videos, also they're always welcome. Thank you for watching. If you learned something today, if this was helpful to you, please like and subscribe to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.